Hello viewers, I'm Khalil Ahmed. Today we're going to talk about a historic perspective, and for that I am joined by Mr. Javed Jabbar, the former Federal Minister of Pakistan, former Senator and intellectual, a great writer. I am honored to have him as my guest. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. So let's get started with the historic perspective of 16 December 1971. Though we all are aware that on 16 December 1971 an agreement was reached, then General Yahya Khan resigned on 20th of December and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto took over immediately after that, and then on 21st of December 1971 the Republic of Bangladesh was formed. Your perspective?
Well, on the one hand, it is little known that Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, 5 months before the creation of Pakistan, had supported the idea of an independent, sovereign, undivided, single state called Bengal. This was a proposal made by Mr. Hussain Shahid Sohrawardi, who was at that time the Chief Minister of Bengal under British rule. And he thought that a single Bengal would be the best solution for the people of Bengal. The British opposed that proposal. The Congress Party opposed that proposal. Why? Because a united Bengal would have meant a Muslim majority Bengal. The only leader who supported that call was Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah. In fact, he said, I believe that the people of Bengal will be very happy with their own state. Look at the paradox. He knew in advance that the construction of Pakistan being accepted, promoted by the Congress and by Lord Mountbatten was going to be a very difficult proposition to sustain. Two wings of almost equal population separated by 1,000 miles of not friendly territory but very hostile territory, because India's leaders had said, Pakistan won't last more than 6 months, and they did their best to try and sabotage Pakistan.
So, Mr. Jinnah, did he anticipate that, since, as you talked about, that two nations divided by 1,000 miles, different culture, different art, different national heroes, and secondly, did he anticipate that, like Calcutta might be, though it might be taken by India, he felt that the port, the industry would go to India. Did he anticipate that?
Well, he apprehended it because he wanted a single Bengal to remain unpartitioned, even if it was not going to be an independent state. He then said, do not divide Bengal or divide Punjab, because Mr. Jinnah wanted non-Muslims to also become Pakistanis. He did not want to push out non-Muslims only because they were non-Muslims. But the irony was that because the Hindu minority in Bengal was the far wealthier and more prosperous part, they put a lot of pressure on the British and on the Congress to ensure that Calcutta went to West Bengal. Because in East Pakistan, East Bengal, through history, there had been a deliberate policy of not constructing factories, creating jobs, and encouraging Muslim Bengalis to become better educated, better resourced. East Pakistan, when it came into being in 1947, was amongst the least developed and most backward parts of South Asia. And it goes back to the 19th century because the British, in a way, discriminated actively against Muslim Bengalis because they had led the mutiny or the revolt against the British in 1857. So it was a form of very perverse revenge. For example, they had specified that a certain height and a certain chest measurement was essential for enrollment into the British Army. And they knew that most Bengalis were not able to meet those requirements. But they were not lacking in courage or determination. They didn't have the physical requirements. So one of the best things that happened after independence was that Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan abolished those specifications to encourage more Muslim Bengalis and Hindu Bengalis to become part of the army, armed forces and the civil administration. So there was a conscious attempt to keep East Bengal or East Pakistan underdeveloped. And it is quite often forgotten that even though later there were accusations that West Pakistan discriminated against East Pakistan, when you look at the facts show that there was remarkable improvement in conditions in East Pakistan after 14th August 1947. For example, at independence, there was only one Muslim Bengali who was an ICS officer, which later became a CSP, the senior bureaucracy. In 24 years, they had groomed and educated hundreds, dozens of officers who were Bengalis and who became part of the official administration of Pakistan. Then there was the construction of cadet colleges. There were more cadet colleges in East Pakistan than West Pakistan. There was an attempt to build a new port in Khulna, apart from Chittagong. Factories were created in Karnafuli, in Narayanganj, in other places to create employment. So, in terms of infrastructure, physical and human infrastructure, there was marked progress. But there were also some deficiencies, because the foreign exchange...
Which could be in any place, of course.
Could be. And I think that has been vastly exaggerated by Indian propaganda and by some elements of the Awami League, which wanted to malign West Pakistan. It's such a tragedy that the real facts about East Pakistan are not widely known. That is why about 4 years ago, I wrote and produced a 110-minute documentary called 1971untoldstory.com. It's available on the internet. You just have to type the words and it will come, where we've attempted to present a more balanced narrative so that people can judge for themselves. And we have interviewed several scholars, eyewitnesses, participants of that process to give their view and present an alternative view of 1971.
I understand. As you mentioned that Mr. Jinnah was against the partition of Bengal.
Yeah.
So was he against the partition of Bengal in the wake of the experience, like, Bengal was partitioned prior to that also, again it was reunited, right? So was that experience kind of horrible experience for the Muslims, since, Muslims were in majority, or at least 50% of the population was Muslims?
Right, quite right. That also shaped his experience. But in the 40 years after that attempt by the British to divide Bengal, much more had happened. So much change had occurred. And the idea of the Muslim need to be recognized as a separate nation, which had not existed as strongly at that time as in the early 20th century, had become much more crystallized. So by 1946-47, Mr. Jinnah was very categorical. He said, we are a minority, but we are not just a minority, we are a distinct nation. And what is a nation? To this day in 2024, 54 years after the creation of Bangladesh and 77 years after Pakistan was born, there is no agreement among scholars on the definition of a nation. For example, There are Native American tribes in Canada and in the United States. Some of them are only 2,000 people. Some of them are 20,000. Some of them are 200,000. They call themselves First Nations. They don't want to be called tribes. They don't want to be called castes. They say, we are a nation. Now, there is one category of nation. There's China with 1.5 billion people. They say, we are a nation.
That's right.
So, similarly, in 1947, finally, Mr. Jinnah said, the Congress Party and the British should recognize that Pakistani Muslims are a nation. That's why we yearn for Pakistan, our own sovereign state. But to his credit, foreseeing perhaps the tremendous dislocation that independence might bring, he, up to the last moment, was willing to live within a confederal single entity which would come into being with three categories of states. One, Muslim majority, one, Hindu majority, and the third would be the princely states, ruled by, say, the Nizam of Hyderabad, Deccan, Maharaja of Kashmir.
Over 500.
562. And he said that plan the British had pioneered, had formulated, was that you come together as a confederation, three zones, and after 10 years, each can decide whether you want to continue or you want to break away. He had agreed to that. And it was the Congress which, after initially agreeing to it, said, no, you should not have the freedom to change after 10 years. So that made Mr. Jinnah realize that there is this worm in the Congress mind, unfortunately dominated by a Hinduist type of attitude. He was not against Hindus. He was very, very universalist and human in his outlook. That convinced him that the only way forward now is an independent Pakistan.
I understand. Well, two provinces, as we talk about, two states, if we say Bengal and Punjab, these were the two provinces or states, to be precise, where there was population of, say, 50-50, right? So when Fazlul Haq in 1940, when he presented a resolution, he said that north, western part and eastern zone of India should be formed as Muslim states, and later it became a state.
Right.
So what was the idea behind that?
Yeah. Initially, you're absolutely right. The Lahore resolution called for a plurality of states. But in 1946, April 1946, when the Muslim League won sweeping victories in the elections and the legislators were called together, the demand for a single Pakistan had become very widely spread. And listening to that proposal from different sections of the Muslim leadership, Mr. Jinnah explained to the press that we are now looking for a single state. And of course it was very amusing when the press asked him, sir, in the Lahore resolution it said states, now how is it now a state? So he didn't want to go into the detail. He said, no, that's a typographical mistake. That way he attempted to sideline that issue, because it was going to be very awkward to say that now we want a single state. But I mean, he and the Muslim League leadership had been driven to this position by the Congress and the Hindu Mahasabha and the RSS that were also actively opposing it. And don't forget, there were fellow Muslims who also were opposing the creation of Pakistan, especially the religious lobby. And they were calling the Qaid-e-Azam Kafir-e-Azam. How hurtful and how terrible it was that a man who was struggling to create a homeland for Muslim majority areas was being called Kafir-e-Azam by his own fellow religionists.
And in 1937, when Muslim League could not win and Congress had landslide victory.
True, true.
So was that a turning point? Because
Yeah.
when Congress won in 1937, so these 2 years from 1937 to 39,
Yeah.
these were terrible years for the Muslims. Since
True.
it was also being accused that Muslim kids, when they went to school, they had to bow before the picture of Gandhi and something like that. And Muslims realized that it is now time
Yeah.
to go for the state which should be purely for the Muslims.
You're right.
And because of that, the next election, Muslim
Very
League
true.
had
Very true.
landslide victory.
Quite right. With only one caveat, I just want to clarify that they wanted a state where the Muslim majority would rule. They didn't want it only for Muslims because they wanted non-Muslims to be also part. As you know, Mr. Jinnah in his famous speech of 11th of August said that all will be equal. I mean, it was a very difficult concept to put across, that on the one hand you're saying a separate state for Muslims and on the other you're saying all will be equal. But such sometimes are the contradictions of history when leaders are struggling to create a completely new entity with such a crazy construction, 52% here, 48% there, and never before in world history, never in history had any state been created on this basis. Very simply, one is able to explain to Americans. Imagine how difficult it was. Can you imagine New York on one side and California on the other, and Russia sitting in the middle, trying to make sure that neither New York survives nor California? How would the United States have grown? So imagine the miracle of Pakistan, that we survived for 24 years. And in some respects, Khalil Sahab, we started doing very well up to 1965. From 1947 to 1965, our economy grew very well. Our infrastructure improved, even though we had been denied our fair share by the Indian government. Mohandas Gandhi went on hunger strike to demand that the Indian government give Pakistan its fair share, which had been promised in writing. And he, in a way, he died for Pakistan. Look at the utter irony that a man who was supposed to be the father of the Indian nation died because he was calling for justice for Pakistan. So, considering all that, what Pakistan managed to do in those first 18 years was phenomenal. And I often tell young people, and I should tell your son, that very bright young boy you have,
Thanks.
that we should learn from those first 18 years, that spirit of building a new country, of sustaining it against all odds, and actually proving that we could do it. So even now, today, Pakistan in 2024 has enormous potential. We've proven it in many fields. And with the changes taking place in Bangladesh, there is a great opportunity to build a new relationship of bilateral equity and equality.
India was never delighted, never happy with the division of Bengal. So, do you perceive that a cyclone of 1970, to be precise, in November 1970, that was an opportunity to capitalize on, since there were certain phrases that gross neglect, utter indifference, and then creation of Mukti Bahani.
Yeah,
so was that an opportunity which was capitalized?
Yes, yes. No, we lost that opportunity. General Yahya Khan, who was president, failed to show the immediate humanitarianism and concern and empathy which he should have shown. He should have in fact remembered what another general about 8 years earlier than General Yahya Khan did. He was from West Pakistan and his name was Lieutenant General Azam Khan. He was appointed governor of East Pakistan by Field Marshal Ayub Khan. But General Azam Khan was such a sincere man that by going out into the street and villages of East Pakistan, he created a bond with the people. And within 2 years, this West Pakistani army general became a folk hero amongst Bengalis who thought Azam Khan is the best possible governor to have. So popular did he become that it started worrying Field Marshal Ayub Khan. So he dismissed him, called him back to West Pakistan. He did not want another army general to become so popular. Now, Azam Khan had already earlier shown his capacity by building Korangi within 6 months to accommodate the thousands of refugees who had camped around the Qaid-e-Azam's mazar. There were huge slums, Kachi Abadis. And 6 months mein he created this huge new township called Korangi, and they were moved out. So, that kind of commitment and service for the people, if it had been shown in November 1970, it would have prevented the Awami League leadership at that time from exploiting that factor and stoking up resentment against West Pakistan. But to be fair to West Pakistanis and even General Yahya Khan, after he unwisely postponed the meeting of the National Assembly in which the Awami League had won 160 out of 162 seats, without giving a new date, 1st of March 1971, immediately there was a very violent reaction. And extremists, some of them who had been infiltrated from India, started killing non-Bengalis, Biharis in particular, Punjabis. I lost 2 friends in that massacre because they associated them with this plot to deprive East Pakistan of its rightful share. Now, the government of General Yahya Khan took one very wise decision. They banned the reporting of any such killings in West Pakistan. And they had already unwisely expelled all foreign journalists from Dhaka after 26 March. So the news about the killings of innocent, unarmed non-Bengalis never came to West Pakistan. The reason was that Yahya Khan's government did not want revenge killings of Bengalis living in West Pakistan. And not a single Bengali was harmed in that whole period when thousands of West Pakistanis were being killed. Look at the paradoxes of history, that you have something that was done very unwisely, postponing the assembly session, but then fortunately not allowing the news of the slaughter to come back to West Pakistan. But the end was tragic. We headed for defeat in 16 December.
Since you talked about the elections of 1971, so there were total 70.
December 1970.
70.
Yeah.
Total 300 National Assembly seats were there.
Yes.
162 were in East Pakistan and 138 in West Pakistan. So Awami League won 160 out of 162, and in West Pakistan, PPP won 81 out of 138. Right?
Yeah.
Number one. Second thing, 6-point agenda. So what actually was in those 6-point agenda which created kind of havoc?
It was, in essence, those 6 points meant that Pakistan in the future would become a confederation where the 2 wings would be completely autonomous, and the people, the government of East Pakistan, would have complete control over all foreign currency earned by the export of jute. It would have complete control.
And jute was grown in East Pakistan.
Was purely a East Pakistani product.
And it was the single largest export earner, right?
Quite right. So they have said we must control it because up to then they felt that the foreign exchange earnings were not being shared equally or fairly with East Pakistan. But also in administrative terms, they wanted autonomous power. A major blunder on the part of General Yahya Khan was that he allowed the Awami League to campaign for 10 months on the platform of 6 points. And the people of East Pakistan had become used to the idea that 6 points is the only way forward. After the results came out, he says, no, these are too extreme, and this would mean the breakup of Pakistan. which was very unfair, because then why did you allow the same party to speak about 6 points for 10 months and everyone got ready for 6 points, and now you suddenly say this is too extreme? That was a major blunder. And also the legal framework order under which the elections of December 70 were held did not specify on what basis will a new constitution be adopted. There was no mention whether a simple majority or a two-third majority. Now, the Awami League did not have a two-third majority. Normally, all over the world, when you make a constitution, you have to have minimum a two-third majority.
That's right.
And to that extent, Mr. Z.A. Bhutto was right that whereas East Pakistan was one province, West Pakistan had become 4 provinces again. So you can't make a constitution which is only according to one province's desire. You have to take into account what the other 4 provinces want. And therefore he insisted that before you sit in the assembly, let us come to an agreement. I personally think Mr. Bhutto should not have boycotted the assembly. He should have gone into the assembly, and in the assembly he could have said, don't impose the 6 points on us, negotiate, we'll come to a understanding.
I understand. Javed Sahab, it's really wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for coming over.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for your invitation.
Well, viewers, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching.